Okay, well, it's very nice to be here again. It's my second time presenting for your group. We've had a chat about this with George. How much should I repeat, and how much should I introduce in terms of new elements in this presentation? George asked me to, just go over the basics once again, and then to focus a bit more on actual tasks, and in particular on the backup. So that's what I'll be doing today. My name, if you haven't read it on the screen, is Gregorio Zanon. I am the team leader at DigiDNA, the Swiss developers behind the iMazing application. I will share my screen now and start the keynote.
Sorry.
Okay, so introduction to local iOS data management with iMazing. There's two important notions here. The first one is local. iMazing is not a cloud service. It's a software that runs on your Mac, and if you have a PC, it could run on the Windows PC as well, by the way. So it is a local application that communicates with your iPhone or iPad or iPod over USB or Wi-Fi. So it's very important to understand this. Your data is yours, it's private, it stays on your own computer. If your computer is secure, everything that you do with iMazing should be secure as well. Okay. The second important keyword, was iOS data management. When I say iOS, I also mean iPadOS, of course. Apple has differentiated those two OSs quite recently, but the guts of the OS are exactly the same. The changes are mostly UI changes between the two. And for iMazing, from iMazing's point of view, iOS is iOS. And if we were to everywhere say iOS and iPadOS, it would be a bit cumbersome. So we tend to just package it all together. iOS means the entire ecosystem of iOS and iPadOS. Moving forward, just a few words about us. So as I said before, the company is named DigiDNA. We are based in Geneva, Switzerland. We do all the software development in-house. We don't outsource development at all. I myself am one of the programmers behind iMazing. I've worked mostly on the backup engine. So I'm reasonably well positioned to talk with you about backups today. The company was founded 14 years ago in Geneva, Switzerland. And really at the heart of the company at its beginning was a small team of Apple fans. I myself didn't found the company. I joined in 2012. And the goal of this company from day one was to extend Apple's ecosystem. So it was very clear already before the iPhone, at the time of the iPod, that this the way Apple does things is not open. They have a single workflow that they offer. In the case of the iPod, it was the synchronization via iTunes to put music on the device, and it can be very difficult to do simple things that should not be difficult. So I'll just jump on this slide and show you this. That will remind you some very bad memories. That's from the time of the iPod. It already existed. At the time, you had an iTunes library, and one library, one device. So if you would connect your iPod to another iTunes library, to your brothers, to your husbands, to your spouses, to anyone else's, it would say, if you sync, I'm going to wipe all the content. So you could not additively synchronize content. You could not add content. And you could also not recover content. So that was a huge problem, but also a huge opportunity for us. Our very first app was Tune8 in 2008. And the goal of Tune8 was to answer one simple need. What happens when you have your music library on your computer and you sync it to your beautiful 64 GB iPod, and then you lose the computer or the hard drive burns down, whatever, you don't have access to the music library anymore. Well, all the music is stuck on the iPod and cannot be recovered. There's no way to rebuild an iTunes library from an iPod or from an iPhone today. So that was the very first thing we set out to do, is offer a way to rebuild your library. And that tool became very popular, and that was the beginning of our activity. During the next 12 years, we expanded on our feature set. It wasn't all about music anymore. It became about files, about photos, about apps. We started doing backup restore, handling messages, WhatsApp, voicemail, call history, voice memos, notes, Safari history, quick transfer, contacts, calendars, voicemail, update, restore, iOS, diagnostics, and more. It's quite a mouthful. There's a lot of features in iMazing, and you don't need to use all of them. Most of our users will come to this software because they have one specific need. They need to achieve something. They find us through our guides or through word of mouth, and they just launch the software and do what they have to do with it. That's maybe half of the users. And what they see when they launch the software now is this. It's quite a far cry from Tune8, just for fun. I'll show you Tune8 again. And now iMazing is a bit more of a modern app, looking quite a bit slicker. Okay, so who uses iMazing and why? So we have about 1 million new users yearly. The ratio between the private and professional use is roughly 60-40. So still more personal use than business use. And as I was saying before, there's so many features that we don't have a typical use case. We cannot say people use iMazing for this or for that. It's actually very well spread. One of the largest use case is exporting messages. Another one is backing up to an external drive, which you cannot do with the Finder. And another one is just transferring files and media. We have like quite a few cases, but you'll find people who only use iMazing to update apps, or who only use iMazing to manage photos, so it's very varied. Now's where I'm really deviating from my previous talk. Previously, I had talked about categories of use cases, and here I'm really going to split it according to types of tasks. So the first type of task is like the one-time or occasional task. So we have people who come to do just that one thing. What is that one thing? Media recovery. I mentioned that before. Rebuild your music library, extract that one track that for some reason disappeared from the phone because of a bug, but it's still there and iMazing can extract it back to your computer. Or you could print your messages or export them to PDF. Very often that's done to fight legal cases of harassment or child custody. It's not the most fun, but it's a very important part of our application as well. Then you could also be in a situation where you cannot transfer your data to a new phone because maybe the old phone is a 512 gigabyte device and the new phone is only 256, and it just doesn't work. So iMazing will let you do a backup restore in one fell swift, a swift file, and that will transfer everything except photos, for instance, because they're in the cloud, so you don't need to transfer them. That enables a direct device-to-device transfer in cases where you're stuck. Then we have diagnostics and troubleshooting. One quite large use case is simply to access the battery health information on iPad. For some reason, the battery health tool, which was introduced, I think, in iOS 12, if my memory doesn't betray me, is iPhone only. On the iPad, you cannot access battery health information. So we'll also demo that. The first part of my demo will be focused on this. And the second part will be focused on regular use of iMazing. Why would you regularly use it? So some of our clients will regularly use it to transfer media, mostly music. One of the reasons for that is that maybe they have a whole library of tracks that are not in the App Store, in the iTunes Store, or not available in Apple Music. So that's one reasonably popular use case. The other one is device management at the enterprise level. that deals with implementing security policies, supervising devices, updating the OS, the apps. Sometimes personal use of those features as well can be found. Then as a research tool, that's more for geeks who like to dig into the iPhone's file system without jailbreaking it. iMazing is very respectful of Apple's security, so we don't do anything to the phone that the Finder doesn't do. It's really the same protocols, the same thing. But via the backup, we are able to give you a much larger insight into the iPhone's internal file system. And the biggest use case to finish with, local backups. And that's how I'll finish my presentation with a demo of local backups, and we'll go into a bit of detail into how you set up local backups with iMazing and what local backups can do for you. By the way, local backups can be done in addition to iCloud backup. Those two are not mutually exclusive. I'll now jump into the first demo, occasional tasks, recovering music, printing messages, transferring data, and troubleshooting, example, battery diagnostics. Let's get started. So first thing, I'm going to connect a test device. It's a little iPod Touch I have for testing, so that you can see exactly what happens when you connect a new device to iMazing. iMazing asks you to unlock the device. This is called the pairing process. You may have seen it with the Finder already. Then there's a prompt on the device itself, a trust prompt, which you have to accept and enter the passcode again. This guarantees that even if you leave a device unlocked, no one can just take it and pair it to the computer. Once a device is paired, the data on it can be accessed from the computer. But you have all sorts of security features that Apple puts in place so that if the device hasn't been unlocked in 24 hours, it cannot connect to the computer anymore. You also have USB accessory restrictions. So after 1 hour of inactivity as well, the USB connection will shut off. So you're quite safe. But pairing is still something that gives access to your mobile device's information from your computer. So you should really be careful about pairing, and you should know that if someone has access to your passcode, he could be able to pair to a computer and then to access a lot of your data. So your passcode is very important. iMazing will immediately offer you to back up the device. We won't do that for now because we'll focus on this later. And for this session, this first demo will focus on those simple tasks I told you about: rebuilding the music library, accessing photos. So you see all the devices listed here in the left sidebar. The one of interest here is this one. We see it's connected via USB with this USB sign, and we can start browsing its contents. Let's go into the music section. Here I have a music library we use for demo purposes. It's very easy to just click on export and decide what you want to export. You can review the types of items you want to export, the entire selection or the library. And I have no music videos here, no audiobooks. It gives you a neat summary of how many items of each are there. And then you just click export to do it. It's very straightforward. You can also very quickly take a track and drag and drop it to the desktop. That's as easy as that. Just going to minimize this, sorry, so I can see what I'm doing. Here, when you do an operation, an extract operation with iMazing, you see the operations progress reported in what we call the operations window, which opens up automatically whenever you do something that can take some time. You can click on the little quick look icon here to reveal the place where you exported it. That's very practical. And then you see that the song is playable and is there on my desktop. Okay. So that's the music view, which, by the way, will be updated very soon in our next minor update with more features. There's going to be artwork displayed there, and there's going to be an integrated player so that you can play tracks without even transferring them to the computer first. Then, oh yes, I should mention this, only show transferable media. This checkbox is enabled by default. A lot of the media on your phone is considered not transferable because it's encrypted. It's protected by DRM. For example, all the Apple Music albums that you could even download to your phone, we can't do anything with them. It's useless to try to export them because the files are encrypted and protected by DRM. So to avoid any confusion, we only show the tracks that really belong to you. When you subscribe to Apple Music, you rent tracks, you don't actually own them. If you buy tracks from the iTunes store, then you own them and they're not encrypted. Although at the very beginning of the iTunes store, they used to be, but then Steve Jobs decided against that and decided to open up a bit more how media could be shared when it was purchased from the iTunes store. That's the music view. Then we'll jump to the photos view. We have some interesting examples here. I took these pictures today just to have a few examples of different types of media. If I click the export button here, same thing as in music, you see a sheet that sums up everything in the library. Here we have standard photos, we have a panorama, we have a burst. Do we also want to include all the frames of the burst, 16, or just the keyframe? We can decide that very easily. Then we have the video, and we can choose to create folders for moments, and we can choose the format, date, location, or location date, the format of the intermediary folders, and we can choose to create folders for media types. Let's not create folders at all just for now. And here, more options, an interesting one, export originals of edited items. That's pretty interesting. Let's just cancel this and see you why this is displayed here. If I select this picture here, I double click on it, I see that it has two assets. I'm sorry for the quality of the picture. I just saved it from Safari, and I apologize to Tim Cook. It's not really nice of me to have chosen such a low resolution version. You see that in assets, we see another version, which is not cropped. So in fact, when you edit an image on the iPhone or the iPad, iOS will keep the original of the edited picture so that you can do non-destructive edits and restore the original or re-edit it as you wish. But both assets exist on the phone, and you may want to export the original, which you can do just by drag and dropping the assets to the desktop. There it is. But on the phone, on your library, you would see this asset and not that one. All kinds of metadata available here as well. And you can also scroll here and navigate your library in that way. Do I have anything with a location? Oh, no, not here. I'll have to show you that from my personal phone. The location is also displayed in this metadata side panel. Here we have a burst. You can very easily select any frame in the burst and just as easily export a single item, just like that. So it's all very convenient, quite performant as well. If I just show you from my own library how quickly it loads, we're able to stream the photos directly from the phone. So first we're parsing the library here, the database, and then we start to display the entire library as quickly as possible and gradually add the thumbnails. So this should happen in just a few seconds. And you'll see that it's very quick. We can really navigate in this library in a very efficient way. By the way, what's interesting is that here I'm streaming the photo library from the phone itself. This is not in iMazing, it's on the phone. I can have bigger thumbnails as well. Oh. And babies, sorry, lots of babies around here. Yeah, so this is not in iMazing, this is on the phone, and it's just streaming from the phone, all these pictures. Now, when you'll be browsing from a backup, we'll see that in the next session, you'll see this from the backup, and that's the whole interest of having this advanced, photo library that took us so long to develop. Is that, of course, Apple's Photos app is unbeatable. Ours is, we don't have 50 engineers working on just that one app, but it's very much usable and looks quite nice, but has all this added power of being able to show you the state of your photo library 1 year ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, recover something from a backup. You can browse the backup exactly as if you were browsing the library of a live phone. And that's very appreciable. Now, onto messages. I've changed to my phone, so that's good because I don't have the messages on the text on the test device. This is the messages view. As you can see, we have photos as well. Emojis are displayed, and you can very easily export messages to a multiple selection. Oops, sorry about that. And export to any format. This would be a PDF. I can choose an export location. Let's put it somewhere else on the desktop to stop crowding it. It's building a PDF file out of it. I can open, and you have the PDF right there. And just as everywhere else in iMazing, you can really easily export multiple items, an entire conversation. You can drag it here, and there you go. It's done. It's working on it here. Yeah. We've exported an entire PDF with 2 conversations at the same time. So all these workflows are very simple, very intuitive. You can focus on attachments only if you wish, or focus on the entire conversation. And you can also search to locate a specific word. So it's very useful. And as I mentioned before, unfortunately, the #1 use case is legal. We see it used a lot in harassment cases to document harassment when victims of harassment will decide to fight back and to sue their tormentor. iMazing is being used as a tool to provide a lot of evidence. And of course, just screenshotting your iPhone is not ideal in those cases. And it really matters in court that there's a professionally produced paper version of the conversations that the judge and the jury can review. So yes, that's the messages use case. I just want to mention one more thing about messages. It is that it's not only used for gloomier cases. We also see spouses printing out their messages as an anniversary gift. For example, the messages from courtship or from their first births together, and we've seen that much cuter use case of a souvenir, printing out a booklet of conversations as a souvenir. We do messages and we do WhatsApp as well. It works exactly in the same way, messages in WhatsApp. Okay, so there we are. The last use case I wanted to talk about was the battery. That's troubleshooting. You see this battery icon here. Just click on there and we have all kinds of technical information about the battery. And I can see that my battery is at 93% health. So 100% is the current charge. I'm using the phone as a hotspot. It's connected by USB, so no wonder it's fully charged. And 93% is the health. What does battery health represent? It represents the design maximum charge, the effective max charge divided by the design max charge. So you can see these values here. Over time, the battery holds less and less capacity than what it was designed for. So the health goes down. Anything below 90 is still usable, but starts to be a bit problematic. Below 70%, you should really start being careful because the battery can start bloating, and there can be some associated fire risks. So below 70 is really not good. 90, even 85, 80 is still somewhat usable. I think Apple recommends that anything lower than 85 should warrant a change of battery. Okay, I'm just looking at how I'm doing time-wise. It's been half an hour, and that's the end of the first part of my presentation. So I'd say time for questions before I move on to the backup.
Okay, I have a couple of comments first. In use case for the messages, I want to add that I held on to text messages from a dear friend for years after she passed away because there was no way to get them off of the iPhone. And iMazing allowed me to get the entire conversations off of the iPhone so that I could store them onto my computer. So I want to thank you just gratefully for that. That was just amazing for me. And another instance where I use iMazing is that when you create emojis on your iPhone, there is no way to get them off of the iPhone. But I used iMazing to get them off and actually use them in some of my presentations. So
you
I
mean
think
the animojis, correct?
yes, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
That's a really fun use case. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, very fun. Donna Warnock, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please? Donna, are you there? Donna's question is our comments. Go ahead, Donna.
I was wondering if you have comments that you've added either to photos or to music, will that transfer over when you're moving photos or music?
I don't believe comments are part of the file itself. They're in the database. So basically, when you have a photo, for example, the photo file, whether it's HEIC or JPEG, has the photo data, but before the photo data, you'll have all sorts of information about the location, the size, the orientation, the camera, and comments are not part of that. Comments are stored in the Photos database on your iPhone or in iCloud. So when you extract the photo, the comment doesn't carry along. It's just not a standard, we call it an EXIF tag.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Donna. Don Peacock, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, my Mac crashed and I didn't have the applications backed up, but I have preferences and all, and I've downloaded iMazing. And well, number one, it's good for, I see it's good for 2 Macs. This is the same Mac and it recognized, but anyway, the library, the Mac is named differently, and iMazing says they didn't find it, but I can't access library in your preferences.
So just 2 things there. One, just about licensing. If you have a per Mac license, of course you can change Mac or reinstall the Mac. If there's ever a problem with iMazing not recognizing or not having any free seats because you forgot to free up a seat, you just get in touch with support at imazing.com/contact, and we free up the slot for you in no time. So don't think that the license is just for one specific Mac. It's for your Mac, and you can change it from one Mac to another, of course. And then regarding your other question about the Mac user changing name and iMazing not being able to locate the backups, I would think it's just a matter of pointing iMazing to the right location, but I would ask all the participants to refrain from troubleshooting questions, because otherwise it's very easy for the session to become a troubleshooting session. But please get in touch at imazing.com/contact. And we have a really strong tech support team that usually answers well within 24 hours, and they'll be with you. As much detail as you can provide them in your initial message, the better, since they'll be able to help you quicker and avoid some ping pongs.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very great. Rob, excuse me, Rob Hoff, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Okay, first of all, thank you. When I just want to make sure if I have 100,000 photos as example in the Photos app, and they're kept in the cloud primarily, and so they're optimized obviously because of the file size. How does it work with the original with that? Do you have to download them to either an iPad or a Mac or what?
So for now, what happens on the iPhone, it's actually a really interesting way Apple has of presenting things. When you enable iCloud and you enable size optimization, you give permission to the OS to flush your files once they're in the cloud if disk space is needed for other reasons. So it starts considering everything that's mirrored in the cloud as what they call purgeable storage. And iMazing will actually display now this new purgeable size in the size pop-up when you inspect a device. So if the files are purged by the OS, iMazing cannot access them, of course. We'll only see a thumbnail and we'll display a warning saying, oh, sorry, but that photo is in the cloud. We can just display the thumbnail. Would you like us to extract the thumbnail or just stop here? We don't have a way around that. The only way would be to log in to your iCloud account. That carries some security risks. We're not sure if we want to do it yet. It's being discussed internally. But if your photos are in iCloud, then you can download them from iCloud.com anyway. So the use for local transfer with iMazing is far less great.
Thank you for that. I had another question. Is it okay if I ask my second question now? Or?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the second question is, when you say you have 100 photos, can you batch change the name or individually change the name, or do you just go with the name that's in your Photos app?
We have two different name conventions. You can choose original file name or iMazing scheme. And then batch renaming is something that you should do in the Finder. The Finder has a great new tool for that to batch rename, but iMazing will not batch rename. It's something that is really the Finder's job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Mitch, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, my question had to do with the music, and actually had a couple questions. So I pull it up. All of my music, a lot of my music shows, but a lot of it doesn't. And all of my playlists, the name of them show, but the data doesn't. On a lot of them doesn't show. If I uncheck that box, only show transferable media, they all show, but they're grayed out.
Sure.
So I was just wondering what my basic question is that, hey, is this stuff really here that if I lose my phone and restore, I'm going to get all this stuff on my new phone, or do I have to rely on iCloud to do that?
Music is a bit specific. It doesn't behave the same when it comes to iCloud syncing. Why are the tracks grayed out? The reason is that they're either iCloud tracks, iCloud music library. So you could have enabled iCloud music library in the music app and added songs to your Mac's music app, and then they haven't yet synced to the iPhone, so iMazing cannot transfer them. That's one reason. Another reason is that they could be Apple Music tracks or tracks that contain DRM. So you have all kinds of reasons that could, explain why iMazing displays a track as grayed out and cannot transfer it. The only,
thank you.
I mean, ideally, if you use iMazing's music transfer function to rebuild a music library from an old phone, or if you're a professional in the industry to quickly move files around from devices and you don't want to use the cloud, but as soon as you start using Apple Music, your playlists become a mix of cloud tracks that you don't own and of regular tracks. So then how can we export a playlist if half of the tracks are encrypted and half of them, maybe they're really yours, so we can export them, but it would result in a partial playlist. It all becomes very unwieldy. So the ideal use case is just push some tracks to your phone if you own them, they're your tracks, your MP3s, recover what you can recover. But I wouldn't advise using iMazing to manage music if you're already an Apple Music subscriber, or if you have another music streaming service such as Spotify. Or you could combine with Spotify. Actually, it would work maybe a bit better because it's a separate database. So you could just use local file transfer for Apple Music and Spotify for all the streaming.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mitch. All right, last question for now. Alan, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
I actually am somewhat confused the difference between downloading pictures from your iCloud versus downloading them from iMazing. Also, once you download them either way, do they fill up your phone and therefore use up all your space?
So what I showed in iMazing was not downloading them, it's just browsing the contents of your phone from your Mac. Then you have to actually do an action in iMazing. When you just click on the photos, you're just browsing your library. And then you copy the file from the phone to the computer. And of course, that will not use space on the phone, but on the target device, the computer. And so the difference is that iMazing will connect to the phone and has nothing to do with iCloud. And if you download from iCloud, you connect to the cloud. In cases where you don't use Apple's optimized storage setting, if you have that disabled, then all the photos will be on the phone. And if you want to export in bulk everything to any computer, then iMazing will be much more efficient than iCloud, because downloading straight from iCloud photos will take ages. It actually doesn't even work. I tried it recently just to run a test. You cannot multi-select so many items. There'll be an error saying, no, you can only select a maximum of 1,000 items. So if you have a 1 terabyte iPad with a huge photo library, even if it's synced to iCloud photo library, if you're able to disable the optimized storage setting, have all the photos on the iPad, you can export everything in one whole batch with iMazing.
All right, great, thank you. All right, no more questions until later. Gregorio, it's all yours.
I will just take 1 minute to go and get some more water. I'm running out.
Sure. Okay. And if you have
I'd just
other
like
questions,
to make a suggestion that he's talking about iOS so much because the iMazing is built for that. But if you want to back up all your iCloud photos, you might be better off doing that on your Mac, because your Mac is undoubtedly going to have more storage, and you have all sorts of backup options such as Time Machine and Carbon Copy Cloner.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Okay. George, that's a very interesting question. I can't see that happening, but because it works specifically with your computer. But we will, if we have time, we'll get to that question. All right, Gregorio, all yours.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen again and move on to the next part. Okay, just to sum up this first demonstration, everything I showed here, oh, sorry, my kids opened the door. I have to close. Oh. The little one is 5, so
okay,
she has to be forgiven.
Absolutely.
Yes, just to wrap up, as I said before this quick demo, occasional tasks like one-time use or occasional is really about performing that one task. And I would not necessarily advise you to manage your music or your photos with iMazing. It's really, if you need to perform a certain task, I think that's quite important because a lot of you may already be using iCloud. So this is not a replacement for iCloud. It's really a way to extract data, move data around. It's not a replacement for Apple's cloud-based tools. Oh, excuse me, I had to run. I went down the stairs and I'm slightly out of breath. I should go to the swimming pool and swim a mile more often. I'll start to do that very soon. Okay, next. Second part of this talk will be about local backups. So why would you start backing up your iPhone to your own computer? Doesn't iCloud do it already? Well, there are many reasons why you would want to do it. First, as I mentioned before, both are not mutually exclusive. The Finder presents it as mutually exclusive. Do you back up to the computer or to the cloud? But in fact, it's not the case. Nothing prevents you from doing both. It's just a choice Apple put forward to simplify the comprehension of how backups should work. But you can very well enable iCloud backup and backup with iMazing. It is the same backup as a Finder backup, the same format. It goes through the same protocol as the Finder goes through to take a backup of the device. And it's a backup format that's everything or nothing. We cannot pick a few files here and there. That's very important to understand. We sometimes have users who get angry because they say, oh, I just want this one message and I have to back up the entire phone. Why is that? Are you guys out of your mind or what? Of course, if we could, we would. But the protocol doesn't work that way. iOS's file system is very secure. It's closed. When you want to do a backup, you ask the device very nicely, please, can you back yourself up? And then you listen and the device sends you the files. And it will send all of them. And you do not get to choose in which order. And if the backup is encrypted, which it should be, then you get encrypted files without having the encryption keys. And you get the encryption keys at the very end. So there's no way to just go and pick a file. That's very important to understand. Now, another reason for having local backups is that iCloud can be inadequate for privacy reasons, for corporate, it may violate certain corporate policies, and it's also not transparent at all. You never really know when a backup is taking place. You don't know how many backups you have. You don't know if they're like, if you could return to a previous backup. You cannot inspect the contents of a backup. You have to restore the contents. You can't just browse it. So they're opaque. And you lack control and ownership over them, basically. They're great, they do the job. If you lose your device, restore to a new one, it's amazing. And the most amazing thing is that you don't even need to think about it. And that's how iCloud backup is very successful and, in my opinion, should not be disabled. But it's not a reason not to have a second backup, which is an iMazing backup or a Finder backup. Now, why would an iMazing backup be better? iMazing backups are vastly better because they have versioning. We take backup snapshots so that you can go back in time to a specific version of the backup. And the Finder doesn't have that. So that's a very good reason. And then iMazing backups can be browsed via iMazing, but so can Finder backups. They're essentially the same. So the one huge difference is versioning and also the ability to back up to an external drive and to back up automatically, as long as your computer and your iPhone are on the same Wi-Fi network. The two can communicate, and iMazing can update the backup, take a new snapshot of your iPhone every day, every week, whatever. Okay, let's move on to, oops, I just did that, that's the last slide, to the demo. So I'm gonna go back to this iPod, sorry, the test device. It doesn't contain much data, so it's going to be very easy to back it up quickly. It's connected here. I click on backup. There's a change here. Oops, I didn't delete. I wanted to do a fresh backup. Apologies for that. Let's delete the old backup. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry, my demo is somewhat going south because we already had a backup of this device. Let me just disconnect it and try this again, because it will give you a better idea of exactly how this works if you connect a device for the first time and you get the opportunity to review backup options. My apologies for this. So once more, I go through pairing. Imagine this is the first time you're connecting a phone. If your goal is to back it up with iMazing, you would not do what I did before and click on later. You would immediately say, yes, I want to back up. Back up now. iMazing informs you of what types of data require a backup because they're not accessible directly. So if you want access to messages, WhatsApp, call history, voicemail, Safari, history, bookmarks, calendars, contacts, and notes, you must take a backup. Let's do it. Now you have this option screen where iMazing shows you everything that you can configure when setting up backups of that device. You have nice natural language everywhere. Automatic backups, consider enabling. Let's enable automatic backups. Backup schedule, backup every couple days. Could set a... Hello?
Yes, you're here.
Everyone hear me?
We hear you fine.
Okay, I forgot to put my AirPods back, but it looks like it just transferred to the mic. Everything is fine. Everyone heard me during
Yes, everything was fine. Yes.
Okay, great. Picking up where I left it, backup schedule every 2 days, preferred time frame. You could say, okay, I only wanted to back up in the nights, so from 6 p.m. to let's say 4 a.m. I don't advise that you do this. It's better to just let iMazing do its thing, but some users will want that. And then only backup if there's enough battery on the phone. You don't want to start a backup if there's only 10% of battery. Backups will drain the phone's battery, so it's important not to initiate a backup if there's only 5% left on the iPhone, for instance. Okay, I've configured automatic backups. I have a nice summary here. This device will be automatically backed up every 2 days. Then iMazing displays a little red badge here to say, hey, your backup is not going to be encrypted. You should enable encryption. Now, you should enable encryption for 2 very important reasons. One is that when you don't enable encryption, not everything gets backed up. Health data doesn't get backed up. And also, I think now Safari history, every iOS version, they add some new data types that get excluded from the backup if you don't enable encryption. This, of course, to better protect your data. Data that is deemed too sensitive, that should not be left unencrypted on your hard drive, gets excluded from the backup by iOS automatically. And the second reason is, of course, that do you really want databases containing all your messages and notes and call history and your whole digital life to lie unencrypted on your hard drive? No, you do not want that. And it's so easy to just enable encryption. I'll set the silliest of passwords, 1234. And here I've chosen to check this remember password box. This will store the backup password in your keychain, in the macOS keychain, so that if you don't remember it, it will be in the keychain. Now, it's very important to understand that once you've, sorry, I had to enter the passcode on the iPod itself to confirm that I wanted to enable encryption. So once more, all the files, once you enable encryption, when you back up, they leave the iPhone or iPod already encrypted. Apple is encrypting it, the files, not us. If you lose the backup password that you set here, it's not a huge drama. You can always wipe the password on the device by resetting privacy settings, but you will not be able to access the data in the backup. We had a sad case a few days ago of the user getting in touch and thinking that it should have been our responsibility to store their backup password on a server somewhere for her to retrieve it if needed. And yeah, it is not our responsibility and it should not be. This is your private data and we won't change our policy on that matter. We do not want to store your passwords on our servers. It's about your data and you should be responsible for it. Backup location. This is a very important one. If you don't have enough space on your main drive, this will turn red and you'll get a message saying, hey, think about choosing another backup location, an external drive. If you're only backing up one device and you have a big 1 TB hard drive and enough space, maybe don't bother. But if you're backing up multiple devices, you should really consider getting an external drive and backing the devices up to the external drive. Backups can get large, especially now that there are storage tiers all the way up to 1 terabytes and maybe even 2. Yeah, those backups can get very large. Not everything is included in the backups, so apps themselves are not included, just app data. Stuff that can be in the cloud sometimes doesn't get backed up depending on Apple's policy on the current iOS version about those data, but the backups can get very large, especially because of photos. On my backup, which is 65 gigabytes, the photo library alone is 45. So nearly the entire backup will be photos. So you can choose a backup location. That's iMazing's defaults. You see the path where iMazing will back up, or macOS backup location. I can't choose that one because I didn't give the right permissions to iMazing. It doesn't matter for now. This is the Finder's backup location. So you could back up to the same location as the Finder if you're also backing up with the Finder. That's doable. And then we have a custom backup location here on the desktop. We could choose the custom one. That would be a good idea. Let's see what it looks like. Where is it? Backup test. Yeah, let's back up here. And what I'll do is I'll clean this location completely so that then I can show you some neat things about backup size. Okay. Actually, I'll create a new location so you can see what I'm doing. Add backup location, new folder, nmug demo backup. This could be on an external drive. It is not for the purpose of this demo, but you could choose an external drive here as your location. Okay. Now, this iPod is set to back up to that location. Everything works fine. Backup archiving is the next item on our list. That's a very important one as well. If you read the natural language summary here, it will really tell you about what iMazing will do. iMazing will archive 1 month of backups and will delete all the backups automatically. Backups are optimized to minimize disk usage. So by default, iMazing will take new snapshots of your backups. And once it's reached 1 month of data, it will stop deleting older backups automatically. Otherwise, it will just become too huge. Now you can change this behavior by disabling it completely. This will guarantee that every single time you back up the device, it will add a new snapshot to your backup history. Or you could choose to keep 3 months of backups, and you can ask iMazing to ask for your permission before cleaning all the backups. So this would be the safest setting. Ask for permission, or even safer, disable it completely. But if you're fine with just having 1 month of backups, then the 1 month setting is fine. We have, even if you have just 1 month, you'll generally, well, if you configure this to 1 month, you'll generally have a bit more because we have all sorts of safeties in place to protect against accidentally deleting a backup that's too old. So it's not that iMazing will strictly delete all the backups. If it finds a really old backup, it's going to ask you, it's going to say, hey, you have a really old one, you really want it to go. So we don't just barge in and delete all the backups like that. But the default behavior, if you're backing up every day, then yes, it will start deleting backups that are older than 1 month. Okay. Then we have the Wi-Fi connection here. You can disable the connection between your computer and your mobile devices if you don't want them to communicate via Wi-Fi, but just via USB. Of course, it's going to be difficult to do automatic backups if you do that, but you can do it. And then you have some settings. I won't go into details here. They don't relate to the backup. Same for the additional options. So I've configured my backup settings. I click backup and I can close the window now and work on something else. iMazing is fully multi-threaded, so you don't need to wait for an operation to finish. It's right there. You can just, I have a prompt to respond to here. Sorry, I'm being interrupted by my own software. So starting iMazing Mini, because I've decided to enable automatic backup, iMazing is asking me if I want to start iMazing Mini. iMazing Mini is the companion app that lives in the menu bar up there, and that will automatically launch when you log in to your computer in order to back up your devices automatically. So iMazing Mini will not launch if you haven't configured automatic backups. We try to be as unintrusive as possible. I will say yes to this. And iMazing Mini is now available here, as you can see. And so when the backup will happen automatically, this little piece of software will be the one to launch it. And you'll see the progress reported here. Okay, we have a backup, it's done. I can click here to view this backup, yes. Now, what's so great about having a backup? As we mentioned before, when you have a backup, you can browse the data in the backup. So I can access the notes. I can access the contacts. It's just me and Tim here for this demo. I can access the Safari history. You see, I searched for Tim Cook because I needed a picture of him for the contact. The phone history will be empty, of course. Then I can also access the calendar, okay, and my presentation. I could export this to a Cal event, ICS, it's right there. I can also access voice memos. There's a recording right here. I can play it. I think that's my daughter saying, "What is this?" She had never seen the voice memo app. Okay, so, and then you can dig into the file system. Via the backup, you see that we have access to much more details. If you go to, this is a connected device. This is what it would be accessible. Documents, media, this just stores your music and your photos. Apps will show the apps installed. I haven't installed any third-party apps on that test device. But if you go into backup, suddenly this is the backups file system, and here you have everything. So for geeks who want to dive into what does iOS's file system look like, this gives you really good insight. Now I will illustrate why having an iMazing backup is so nice. So we have this backup I made just now. Now what I'll do, I'll show you the photo library again. I'll delete some photos and just a sec. So I'll delete the burst and the Tim Cook and my photo as well. And then I will flush the recently deleted. I'm doing this on the iPod itself. I'm sorry if you're not seeing much. It's not very interesting. Okay, I'm flushing the recently deleted. If I can, okay, delete all, done. Now I'm making a new backup. I'll do that again. So if I was in the Finder backing up, I would be overriding the backup I had containing the photos with the backup I'm making now, which doesn't have the photos, which would be, a case of classic data loss. If you look here, if I refresh, the pictures are gone. I just have those three. So because iMazing does backup versioning, here we just took a new snapshot. Now you see we have two different snapshots. So the first item represents the live device, and the others represent the backups, the snapshots. I can go back to 631 and load the photos from there. And as I told you before, this is exactly as it was. I have my burst. I can access all the assets from the burst. It's exactly as if I was accessing the library of the live device, except that, it's a backup. And so I was able to recover, to protect against data loss by having this versioning. If I go into the more recent backup, you see that these files are not backed up anymore. And that's the same for notes, for messages, conversations, for your entire data. And if I jump to my own phone, you'll see I have a bit more backups here. And so I'm able to go back in time and to double click any of these snapshots and inspect the state my phone was in at a given date. And that can be really priceless depending on the situation. So that's a big plus for iMazing backups. They are yours. They let you own your own data. They let you browse back the state of your phone back in time, just like a time machine for your iPhone. And that can be very powerful and very useful. So it's not just about giving you access to data and exporting it, it's also about protecting it and offering greater transparency than iCloud backups. Now, if you want to go get into the nitty-gritty of the backup format and explain why backups seem to take a larger space than they really do, I know this was a question that has been asked by a few users. We can easily reveal the backup in the Finder and inspect it a bit. So I'll minimize iMazing now. This is the main backup folder. This barbaric name is a UDID of the iPod that was backed up. This is Apple's format. We didn't decide on this. And you see that the format is not human readable. All the files are what we called hashed. So you cannot even understand what these files map to. If you go all the way down, there's actually a database here that's encrypted as well because we enabled encryption that stores a mapping between the file names. So this and what file does it actually represent? So without the backup database, this is just junk. We cannot do anything with it. And that's why you would need iMazing to understand the contents of your backup. So this is exactly the same as a Finder backup. There's no difference at all. The difference comes here in iMazing.versions. iMazing.versions/versions. And here you have the two snapshots. Now, they are snapshots, meaning only the new files will get backed up in a snapshot, so that we don't, flood your hard drive with multiple full backups. That would be absolutely awful. So these are incomplete backups. Never go into the file system and start thinking that these are backups and trying to restore them or whatever. They are incomplete, the snapshots. Only iMazing can work with this. Every backup software can work with that. Only iMazing can work with everything that's in iMazing.versions. Now, the disk usage issue, if I run a get info here, it says the backup is 202 megabytes. But in fact, if I look at its size in iMazing, it's saying 127. It's right here, 127. Why is there such a large discrepancy? It's very simple. It's because of a technical feature of most file systems called hard links, which lets you have two files in two different locations that point to the very same real file on the hard drive. So the finder will see the file twice, count it twice, count the size twice, but in fact, it doesn't really occupy twice the space. It occupies just half of the space that the finder reports. And this is because we use hard links for the backup snapshots. So when you first build a backup, well, backup a phone with iMazing, at the end of the backup, iMazing will take the snapshot of it, of the entire backup, and put it here. And this first snapshot will be counted by the finder as a full backup as well. So the finder will report double the size of the real size of the backup, which can be huge, because if your backup is 60 gigabytes, the finder will report 120 just for that first backup. But it is simply untrue. And this plagues not just iMazing, but all apps which take snapshots, including Time Machine. It's the same with Time Machine. You'll have snapshots, and the finder will not accurately tell you about the size of these backups. Now, just to give you a proof of that, I'm going to launch a terminal window. And wait for the terminal to let me type. Okay. I'm going to go into this folder and type du-h. Du is a macOS standard utility. It stands for disk usage. And this terminal utility will accurately compute the real disk usage of a given folder by not just going through the list of files and counting every one of them, but also looking at the underlying real file on the file system and not counting the same file twice. So now if I do this, I have a total size of 130 megabytes. And that is the, the whole proof that you would want to need. It will actually stop counting whenever it sees that a file has already been counted.
Gregorio, we're almost out of time, but we have one very important question for you. Esther, can you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, my question is, how do you actually restore a backup? So once, we instead of just looking at it, oh, historically, gee, that's the version that I love, I want it back now on my device. What do I need?
Sure, I will showcase this immediately. 1 second. Back to iMazing. So usually you don't want to restore a specific version, but if you do, make sure you inspect it first and that it's from the appropriate date. So you could select the older backup here, the older snapshot, and just click restore. And iMazing will ask you for a target device. Because we also an app used in professional contexts, we also allow you to restore the same backup to multiple devices at once. That can be used for deployment purposes in schools, for example. So don't be alarmed if you have multiple phones plugged to your computer to see a list here. And now you could just select the device, click next, and then you have the opportunity to customize the restore process. So you can decide to restore everything but not photos, for instance. We just give you a little warning here about how this works. Not so photos, not Safari data, not voice memos, but I really want the messages and the notes. Okay, save. You can also choose which apps will get restored. And then you can erase first. If the target device is too full, sometimes it's good to erase first. And you can give the target device a name. Okay, and then proceed. Now this is a somewhat of a wrong image of what a restore looks like, because in reality, if the target device is already set up with an Apple ID, you would first need to disable Find My iPhone. Here, we don't have an Apple ID set up, so we didn't have to go through that step, but iMazing will prompt you to disable Find My iPhone when you restore a backup. That's an Apple requirement.
So would you then, let's say you get a new device, a new iPhone, and you want to transfer the data from your old iPhone to the new iPhone, is it advisable to do that through iMazing then?
If you don't have an iCloud backup, sure, it's advisable. Or if you use, even if you use iCloud Photo Library, but if you don't use the optimized storage option, so if you don't use optimized storage, all your photos, your iCloud photos will be on the source phone. Now, if you restore through iCloud, it will take ages for everything to download back from iCloud. If you transfer with iMazing, everything will get transferred immediately. Once you finish the transfer, it takes maybe an hour and a half if you have a large backup with 60 gigabytes. But once it's done, it's done. Your entire assets, your photo library will be available on the target device without requiring to connect to iCloud.
Super, thank you.
So what we see is, yes, most users will use iMazing for that, or because somehow the iCloud backup restore didn't work, or the device-to-device transfer, the direct new feature where you can just put the iPhones together and they transfer from one to the other, that is broken also in some way. So they turn to us. But if you want to do just a phone-to-phone transfer, we have a wizard that's made just for this, transfer to another device, and that will do in one go both the backup and the restore. So you don't even need to go through two steps.
Wonderful. All right, everyone, if your question was not asked or answered, if you could please go to the bulletin board, our iOS group, and post your questions there, and we'll get to them as best we can. I want to thank you, Gregorio, for such a wonderful presentation, and I think iMazing is absolutely amazing.